Good morning, everybody. Welcome on into your FreightWaves Now Community Spotlight on this Thursday morning, where we get to chat with the one and only Thomas Wasson, host and writer of our Loaded and Rolling newsletter. And he is our enterprise fleet expert. Thomas, it's another busy news week for us. We had a major category hurricane make landfall in Florida last night to the early parts of this morning. Of course, still reeling from Hurricane Helene that made landfall about a week and a half ago. And everybody's eyes are on FEMA loads. I need to know the long and short of it. What is this going to do to the trucking market?
Well, we're going to see a lot of freight being put in the system, especially when we had Helene happen. And then it was an interesting scenario. Here I am hanging out. I see on a Twitter thread, oh, this thing, here's another storm that may like cross the peninsula. And then next thing you know, it may turn into a larger hurricane. That was like a week ago or week and a half. And I thought, well, that's weird. They normally don't cross. And then it did. So this is where we're at now with Milton. And, for the freight market itself, it's going to be a situation where we were talking about a few months ago. What would it take to have an upswing? So there's two theories. One theory is that it's structural, as in enough capacity needs to leave the market. Another theory is that it's impacted by events. And so this is going to be a big test to see if this can kick off not only a spot market that's lagging, but a contracted space where we haven't really gotten out of the rut since the late 2022, so like mid to late. So it's going to be something worth watching. I think that the impacts of this, it'll take a week or two to fully be felt, but at the same time, the addition of all that FEMA freight is one of those truckload demand shocks that may kind of shake things up a little.
So we touched on this briefly when we were talking about Hurricane Helene and the impacts from what was expected there before it made landfall and before we start to actually see some of the FEMA load starting to be dispersed. And let's be very clear, the relief from that hurricane has been, I think, kind of anomalous when it comes to FEMA freight, simply because so much of what moves on the road was not actually able to move into the hardest hit areas because the roads were destroyed in Western North Carolina. So a lot of that FEMA freight that would typically be moving into those hardest hit areas isn't able to get there. We're seeing it move by helicopter instead. If only there was like a helicopter load rejection index that we could look at and we would maybe get a better gauge, right? It's comparing like apples to oranges there. I don't know. But with this one set to hit Florida, we do know that, of course, there is a better interstate infrastructure down there. And it's more, you can call it traditional in the way that aid will end up being dispersed. And the interesting point here is that there are already lots of carriers who are listed and approved as FEMA carriers. That's how they get direct FEMA freight distribution. So should we be watching for the main impacts to be on those carriers who maybe backfill some of the space where the regular carriers could be that were typically hauling freight and move to FEMA loads, and then the anomalous carriers who aren't approved for FEMA loads backfill the freight?
Yeah, we should see a rise in outbound tender rejection rates because that's going to be something where FEMA freight gets added in the system. Imagine you get like 500 loads dropped in your system at once. You're going to have situations where you have to turn down freight in other parts of the country or other parts of your network because you suddenly have more important freight to pick up. So definitely, traditionally, we should see a rise in tender rejections. Now, the spot market is a very different thing. A lot of the brokerages, Adam Wingfield had a great comment where many of those brokerages and other carriers who are already set up receiving these FEMA loads, you're not going to post it on a load board. I know that sometimes a lot of folks assume that the spot market is only the load board. There's internal load boards and there's also internal tenders on the spot. It's not just is it on a load board or not? But I currently don't see a situation where we'll see a sudden surge in spot market rates yet because it would be something where it would have to be a market getting completely destroyed to see some kind of movements in rates. But for the FEMA freight itself, the big question we have to watch is I don't think much of it will hit that spot market because, I mean, if you're a broker or a carrier, you're not gonna get approved to be tendered FEMA loads and go through the extensive process for the government to trust you, and you're gonna give it to some schmuck who called in on your load.
Exactly. It's not the easiest process to get approved to that. So why would you just pawn off that freight to somebody that you don't know has the credentials to haul it? Let's move on to our second topic for this morning. Strong Class 8 orders that actually beat seasonal expectations, September being the start of 2025 order books. Good news, I feel like, for the markets because we've been watching these orders really be very, very slow this year.
Oh yeah, we've come out of the summer doldrums. When it comes to Class 8 orders, truck and trailer orders in particular, the OEMs open up their next year's order books at or around September. So having a good start off the right off the bat, September and October are kind of the two big months to watch if you want to see if it sets the tone. So the next things we need to pay attention to is there's going to be a lot of cancellations. I don't think so at the moment. Backlogs are looking pretty good, so there's a lot of supply of Class 8 trucks still, but it's a healthy sign, especially considering the fact that analysts have been talking about how carriers just haven't had as much money, so they're still upgrading their tractors, but trailers are a completely different matter. There's few different things to take with this. One of them being, is this part of what some have theorized as the pre-buy leading up to the model year 2027s, where they're going to have additional emissions and be about $20,000 more? Well, I don't know yet, because maybe it's going to be next year, but we're looking at that as maybe a potential one. We'll have to pay attention to Q3 earnings as well. What we want to see is if fleets are mentioning their the average age of tractors. That's an important metric, because if the average age of tractors goes up, that means you're not placing as many replacement orders. You want it to be around a certain number. Now, if the average age of tractors is moving downwards, it does mean that they're improving and replacing older equipment faster in their fleet. That's one of the big things. This is one of those where we want to pay attention. It's a good sign, but we can't just take it in isolation.
And for those numbers, both ACT and FTR both had September orders over that 30,000 mark, which was honestly really great. And according to those stats, double the number compared to August for ACT, and an increase of 107% month over month compared to August for FTR. As we move into the end of the year, your expectation continue to see this trend, or maybe see a little bit of a leveling off?
That's one of the big questions here. I think that structurally, we'll probably see a very strong September and October. Looking into November and December, that's kind of where the crystal ball gets fuzzier. We are moving into an election. There's a lot of stuff that we're waiting to find out. So I wouldn't place any bets right now, especially given the overall like market and macro conditions. I'd look at things like used truck prices as well and see about some other options. But it's a nice promising sign, because analysts were kind of split. You don't really know. There's a lot of theoreticals in this industry when you're trying to make expert predictions here, and it's nice to see that there's still healthy demand. Another interesting one is paying attention to the vocational sector. It's your medium duty class 5 through 7. That's going to be another story to watch. I know we don't really hammer on that very much, but if you want to look at like the overall health of some of the smaller carriers, parcel and stuff like that, that's going to be another thing to pay attention to. And then finally, is this going to be something where, moving ahead, will we see instances where we get reported for like zero emissions vehicles or natural gas or other types of class 8s? That's going to be something interesting to watch as well, because we're seeing that technology get rolled out ahead of that 2027 EPA guidelines, that phase 3 ruling. So there's a lot of things to pay attention to. It's really early in the ball game. We're in like the second inning right now, so I feel like we're just getting warmed up.
All right, Thomas, last question for you here before I let you go. We are just about 2 weeks into October, which means that third quarter earnings should be rolling in here anytime soon. Is there anyone that you're expecting to have either a great third quarter or a terrible third quarter?
I think if you're pure play trucking, you're probably not going to have a fun third quarter. It's probably going to feel more like the second quarter. But if you have intermodal or LTL, we have some truckload carriers that are mixed. Think of like your JB Hunts, your Knight Swift, some Schneiders, folks like that. If you have stuff outside of trucking, we want to pay close attention to that, see how they're performing as well, because we did have a situation where a lot of port stuff was pushed forward and we saw a lot of activity. And so see if they were able to capture some of that, and also look at management talk to see, because I am curious to see if the impacts of the strike or anything else may be given as a reason for some of the performance. So pay attention to the word bingo.
There you go. It's going to be interesting to watch. And I'm sure that coming in the next few weeks, we will have a lot to talk about here on our Loaded and Rolling community segment. Thomas, thanks for joining us this morning. Of course, you can catch Loaded and Rolling the show live Tuesdays at 2 o'clock right here on FreightWaves TV, and go sign up for his newsletter as well. We will talk to you next week.